Hello, I'm Debbie. I'm Owlandgatorstitcher. Welcome to Flosstube number 60. Today is Thursday, September 28th, 2023. This is a video mainly about cross stitch, sometimes what I'm reading and watching as well. It's been about 2 weeks since my last video, so if you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for coming back. I really appreciate all your comments and all your likes. And if you're a new viewer here, welcome. I hope you like what you see and you'll stick around. So it's on the stitching front a little bit quieter for me than usual in terms of actual stitching. My husband and I went to Salt Lake City for a few days. He had a convention that he wanted to attend there, so I went with him. I didn't go to the convention, but as everyone knows, when you go to Salt Lake City, you have to make a pilgrimage to Shepherd's Bush. So I did that. I also went to another cross stitch store, and I'll show you those goodies that I got towards the end. But it was a good trip. We really liked Salt Lake City. We had some good food. I would say the only downside for this Florida girl here was that there had a dip in the temperatures. It was probably in the 50s a couple of days, and those were the highs. And while we knew what the weather was, it's always a shock when you're going from like the mid to upper 80s to the mid 50s. I handled it. It was fine. I would say it was much worse on the plane where we ended up taking a flight that went from Phoenix to Charlotte, and it was a red eye. You know, I thought I was going to sleep the whole flight, and they couldn't. They managed the temperature controls really poorly, and it was so cold on that flight. I don't think I've ever been that cold on a flight, and of course, these days they don't give you blankets or anything like that. So you just have to sort of sit there and suffer. And I was dressed. I mean, I had closed-toed shoes and long sleeves and long pants and all of that. It wasn't like I was wearing clothes that were meant for 90-degree weather, but it was really kind of disappointing. So learned my lesson, and I will be bringing a hoodie on my next journey with that airline, whenever that will be. So with that, I am going to go ahead and do my giveaway winner from the last video. So I was giving away two things, but no one wanted the first one. So the second one that I was giving away was strawberry shortcake from Glendon Place. And so I did a drawing before this video started, and the winner is Stitching by the River. So I think I have your address, but it'll be great if you can just reach out to me to confirm that you're still living in the same place. And my contact information is below, so either through Instagram or through email. So congratulations. All right, so with that, I am going to jump in and start to show you some of my stitching. So I mentioned in my last video, I play a lot of games on Facebook, but two of them have sort of directed where my stitching has gone. One has been in Semi-Sane Stitching. They're having a bingo game, not bingo, Go Stitch, that's what it's called, where basically they spin a wheel, and if whatever letter comes up, you have to pick a pattern that starts with that letter. And so not an object in the pattern, not the designer, not the second or third word, but the first word, A and V, doesn't count. But so that's been fun. Some of that, and then if you don't have a pattern with that letter, you can go stitch and do double number stitches. And the second thing was in Whip Warriors, I am doing there's a full coverage event, so I was working on that as well. So the first piece I want to show you, this is one I haven't pulled out in a really long time. This is Beach Dance from Lindy Stitches. I think it's been over a year since I've worked on this, which, I always say that, but that I love Lindy Stitches, and I really, really do. But for some reason, I think smaller patterns, I'm not as drawn to stitch on them. And so I love them when I'm stitching on them, but then as I just try and decide each day what I'm going to stitch. The smaller patterns sometimes don't get the love they need. So this one I worked on, and I've only put in a couple hundred stitches, but here is where I am. So this is a 32 count even weave. I believe it is mint from Picture This Plus, but I'm not 100% sure. So basically all I did on this one, I had the heads of the birds done already. And I had done a little bit of this very light color here. So I just basically extended him down for a couple hundred stitches. So again, fun stitch, easy stitch. There's no reason why I don't work on this, except it's just one that doesn't come to my mind all the time. But the letter B was drawn, or spun for, I guess, in Go Stitch. And I had worked on Brownfish Owl for quite a bit earlier in the month. So I said, okay, let me give some love to a different bee. So this is the one that I pulled out. Next one that I worked on, I show almost every video. This is Portrait of Veronica from Mirabilia. And here is where I am. So I put in stitches sort of in this area here. I think I had a lot of this done. I may have had a few little pockets of colors that weren't done. And so I put in a lot here and came over this way. I did take this one traveling with me. It's a 32 count linen, which I usually sometimes find hard to stitch on if I don't have really good light. But I think the way this linen is, it's Star Sapphire from Witchelt, and it's not an overdyed, and I think the holes are big enough that it's easy for me to see them. So I find that even stitching on this, I mean, obviously light is good. And I did have some, like if I was trying to stitch in the evening, I really couldn't stitch on this one, but during the daytime with daylight, it was fine because I didn't bring a light with me and the hotel room did not have good lighting. So that's where I am with that. So this is the bottom of the dress. All right, the next piece that I worked on, Jay got spun for twice, and so I worked on this for 400 stitches. This is the Jane Eyre Stitch Along from the Stitching Book Club Sapphire Mountain Handcrafts. So this is one that she came out with last, I think at the very end of the year, December last year. And she gave us the whole chart at once, but then broke it down and said, let's read and stitch. And I can't remember, it was like 9-12 weeks, something like that. And they were, with the exception of the first thing, which was that motif in the middle, they really are bite-sized chunks. They're really not hard, but I didn't try and keep up, and so I just finished the second part. So let me show you where I am. This is a 32 count linen from Picture This Plus Vellum. So here is where I am. So it's not a huge pattern. So I already had this center thing done and part of Gateshead Hall done, but I finished Gateshead Hall. It was the roof and this little side thing here, and then did all this floral motif here, and then there is some back stitching in the window, and then I wrote in Gateshead Hall. So to the extent I can, I'm trying to follow, even though I have the whole pattern, how she broke it out, because that does follow the storyline a little bit. So just kind of I've read the book multiple times, including, I didn't read it necessarily for the book club, but Beth, the Steadfast Stitcher, who runs I always forget if it's Books and Crafts or Crafts and Books Facebook group, we did have that as every 3 months she does a classic, and we did have that as one of our classic books this year. So it's nice to sort of stitch and recall the book. As you know, I'm an avid reader. So anyhow, that is where I am with this. And so this is the center. This is already one side. So it's not going to be a super huge piece. It's one of those pieces that, and again, when I stitch on it, it goes very quickly. It's just not one that comes to the top of the pile very often. Next piece that I worked on, and this was for the full coverage event in Whip Warriors. And this is Green Dancer from Artisy, artwork by Edgar Degas. So this is obviously a classic impressionist painting. And here is where I am. So I am halfway done. So it's technically a 12-page pattern, but Artisy, this is a printed pattern, and there are printed pages. It's like a huge, the pages are small. So like I can get, this is 18 count Ada, I can get the whole width of this into an 11-inch Q-snap. So where I worked on here, I'll fold it down a little bit. Where I worked on was just sort of pulling colors. So did a lot sort of, and because I can fit the whole thing in, I'm working 3 pages across at a time. So I just pull a color and try and find all the symbols, stitch it, leave it on the table, because I can guarantee that I've missed a stitch somewhere. And then when I find that, I'll pick up the color and stitch it again. You can see I still have some ninja stitches. I'm not quite done with these pages yet, but those are not a huge number. Sorry, and that is, I was like, what is that? Is that a whole big patch I missed? But that actually is some skin or something. So I would say about halfway done with this pattern, because even though I do have those ninja stitches, you can see I've got some other stitches as I've carried colors further down. So a fun stitch. Again, just because it's paper pattern, I don't pick it up as often as I do some of my other ones. Another one I worked on, W was called in Go Stitch. So I pulled this out. I started this also with Beth, the Steadfast Stitcher. She, in her group, is doing a Stitches So Beautiful, and that's who the designer. I'm very shiny today for some reason. I think it's the reflection of the light. The designer for this pattern, and the artist is Sphinx Design Studio. So she has an Etsy shop, Stitches So Beautiful, spelled S-E-W. And so the Sal basically was to work on anything from Stitches So Beautiful. So I started this. She has some amazing patterns on there and different art, because she's reaching out to artists that she finds on Etsy and says, hey, can I chart your work? And she works with them. So I haven't done very much. That's all I've done, but I put in another couple hundred stitches here. All the green, more green, I should say. So fun stitch. This one I am doing 1 strand, 1/1, full cross on a 22 count hard hanger, actually. So, and then the next one I pulled out for the full coverage event in Whip Warriors. This is Tug of War from Mystic Stitch, which is now a company that is no longer active. So pull this one out, and basically I finished I had some of the black here, and it does continue a little bit onto the next page there, but it's not that interesting because it's just some black stitches, and that will be the bird here. And these stitches here that I still need to do are the top of the little bow that the sparrow is pulling. But then I did put a lot of stitches into the clothespin, and now you can really start to see what it is. And I just, I love the way this comes together. Kind of for a long time looked like a mass of nothing. And then just by putting, I think, this little strip in here that just sort of shows, the light and just sort of, distinguishes between the two sides of the clothespin. It's just coming out really nicely. So that is Tug of War. Next piece, which is probably one of my most confetti heavy pieces. This is Oak Dry from Mystic Stitch, as you can tell. Also a paper pattern. And I say this every time I stitch on it, but I live in northern Florida, and to me, where I live, the live oak is sort of the symbol of where I live in Florida, old Florida. You hear it talked about sometimes. So not palm trees and other things that you associate more with the beach. I don't live anywhere near the beach. I'm 50 miles inland in both directions. So for me, this reminds me of home more than like a beach and a palm tree scene. Not that those aren't lovely. But anyhow, so this, I really, really, really wanted to get a page finish on this. This is actually page 1. So this is 18 count Ada. Mystic Stitch pages are like Haid regular pages. So they are very stitch dense, unlike Artisy, which is like, this probably has almost 9,000 stitches on a page, where Artisy one probably has about 3,500. So I was very happy to finally get a page finish here. I did a lot of work over here as well on this branch coming over. So this is very confetti heavy, and part of the reason why I was alternating back and forth is the branch is not confetti heavy. It's I did a lot of black here, but there's also like 3371 and other dark browns in there, but in chunks of color. So it sort of allowed me to go back and forth and have that little bit of a break. That is nice sometimes, but I just love the way this is coming out, the way that you have this sort of canopy of leaves and the light coming through, and just the way, even on one page, you can really see what it is, and the Spanish moss hanging down, which is also very common on live oaks. So really loving this. This is very slow going. This is definitely a process stitch for me, and not something I'm ever thinking that I'm going to finish in my lifetime. As much as I would love to have this hanging on my wall, it's a beautiful piece of work. It can be a bit tedious at times to work on, but I just love the results and the way it's coming out. So, and I've mentioned this in the past, I have goals for all of my projects. It's not an annual goal. It's just, let's try and achieve all of your goals, and my sort of prize, so to speak, for achieving those goals would be my next whip parade. And so I haven't, many of my pieces, gotten close to achieving those goals. But That mine was to finish that branch and page 1. So I have achieved my goal on that. So I'm not saying I won't pull it out till I achieve all my other goals, but it probably will when I'm starting to think about things and something says stitch with something with a tree. This one probably won't go in the running. It could, who knows? But that's sort of the way I'm thinking about it right now. So, and I did when I made my goals, knew that it would take me more than a year to get everything done. I would say the one thing about that was what I did not factor into it was new starts, which I'm not putting any real limitations on myself with new starts this year. But when you have to do a new start, you want to work on it, and that's part of the fun of it. And so that does mean that it takes away from hitting my goals on other pieces, which I'm fine with. This is meant to be a hobby. Well, it is a hobby, and so it just sort of gives me like mile markers of okay, you've accomplished this much. All right. My last piece I'm going to show you is Cats in the Toy Box, charted by Heaven and Earth Designs, artwork by Leslie Ann Ivory. Folks, I'm so close on this. This is the last move of the Q-Snap. I put in this month, so you would have seen some of this progress in the last video, but I put in September about 5,500 stitches, and I think there's about 5,500 to go. So I am really determined to get this finished next month. I had really wanted to get it done by the end of the year. I'm well on target for that, but I'm at that point where I'm like, put your head down and get it done. So it's hard to know because I'm sort of picking and color completing. Sometimes I'll go for the lowest color with the lowest number of stitches. Sometimes I'll go for the colors with the highest number of stitches. I think I'm now at the point where even the colors with the most stitches have fewer than 300 stitches each. So really making great progress. This is not a max color, it's just regular color. So there's under 90 colors. So I've actually color completed quite a few of these, especially the lower ones. But last night I was determined and I finished the Krynic. So no more Krynic. So a lot of Krynic here. It's all the white color basically. She doesn't use a lot of white in her patterns. When it calls for that, she uses Krynic 32. So a lot of here, and then maybe a little bit more like in here. That was what was left here. Did a lot of work on the baskets, so a lot of the dark browns in there, and just love the way that this basket is coming out. Not my favorite colors to stitch with, but I love the effect on it. And so sort of obviously I need to do work in the basket. A little bit of the border down here. This sort of big chunk here is the kitty's tail, this kitty over here. Do more work on the penguin, and I'm not sure what to call that. It's not a Weeble Wobble, it's some sort of wooden doll. And then just a little bit more beads, and obviously to finish the horse's head. But having so much fun with this one. So glad this has been my focus piece. You know, when you pick a focus piece, sometimes you can get tired of it and switch. And this one for basically, I started this on January 1st, 2020, and didn't do that much. The first year I maybe did a page or something. I was still working, so I didn't have, it was the pandemic, so I had time to stitch, but I wasn't, obviously my time was getting pulled in other directions. But in 2021, I said, okay, this is going to be my focus piece. And it's about 141,000 stitches total. So during that time, I've sort of adjusted what it meant to be a focus piece. Depending on how my stitching changed a little bit, but it always sort of stayed there. And some months it was only 2,000 stitches. Last year, I think I averaged 3,000 to 4,000 stitches on it. It was about averaging 3,000 a month this year, but when I sort of realized when I moved the Q-Snap really how little I had left, that's when I just sort of said that's why I did 5,500 this month, and we'll try and hit that next month to get to finish. I am going to the Queen City Stitch Retreat, also known as the Mirabilia Retreat, actually next week. Really looking forward to it. Get a chance. I know a number of you are going, and I'm really looking forward to meeting you. And then also just other people, Flosstubers that I watch, or people that I've interacted with my games on Facebook, wherever, people I haven't met before. So it'll be a lot of fun to meet all these people and just to look at all the goodness, the Mirabilia goodness that's there. And I know Corinne from Grace Notes Fabrics is coming. And she's going to bring what she's calling a pop-up store. So obviously she's going to have a lot of her luscious fabrics, but she's also going to be bringing a lot more than that. So I'm sure it'll be a lot of notions and Mirabilia patterns and beads and the threads that, so it's not going to be like a full store where you walk in and you can get exactly what you want, but she's going to have a lot there. Obviously, she has to drive it down, so that limits what she can bring. But she did that. I mean, different types of patterns at the retreat I went to last month in Pennsylvania that she hosted. But it will be a lot of fun to see what she brings that is different, because she doesn't have a brick and mortar, and they really do focus on fabric in their business, but they do sell other things. So really looking forward to that retreat. And if you're going, I look forward to meeting you. Okay, so with that, that is all the stitching I have to show. I know it wasn't as much as I sometimes show because, again, because of my traveling, I chose not to stitch on the plane. I did stitch a little bit in the airport, but I thought, like, especially given the timing of my flight, I was going to be able to sleep because we had some late night flights, and so I just decided not to pull out my stitching and have to deal with that on the plane. So, but with that, I'm going to show my goodies. So if you're just here to see all the stitching, thank you so much for stopping by. But for those of you who want to see the goodies that I got, I'm going to show them right now. So I went to 2 stores. I went to Shepherd's Bush and the other one, and honestly, I can't. It's like fine crafts and framing. It's something like that. Like, it's not like cross stitch in the name. So I'd have to hold, please. I'm going to look up the name for you. Okay, I'm back. It is the Craft Center of Fine Stitchery. So it is basically a cross stitch store with framing. So, I mean, and I obviously wasn't getting anything framed, so I didn't really pay attention to that part. I mean, there was quite a good selection of frames on the wall, but I didn't look at them. But in terms of the non-framing stuff, it really was almost all cross stitch. I mean, there may have been some threads that you might use for needlepoint or something like that. But really, in terms of the patterns and other things they sold, really almost everything I saw was cross stitch related. So the first item that I'm going to show you, I got a little Petite Gold Dimensions kit. Sorry, it's got a little bit of glare, so it's the full kit. And this little kitty, is it called Sleeping Kitty? No, Napping Kitten. There we go. I didn't bother to look at the name. I just thought it was really cute. You know, I love my cats. So I just thought that was a really good one to have. I have to say, I don't see a lot of stores that carry dimensions kits. Like my Joann's has a few, but it's the same few. And I know Hobby Lobby used to. I don't really shop at Hobby Lobby. It's not in a convenient location for me. But even when I would go in there, they did have a better selection, but the ones I've been into since then, like, apparently, I think all of you know this, that they've sold off a lot of their cross-stitch stuff. And so, like, now they're kind of the equivalent of Joann's, what they offer in terms of their cross-stitch selection. So, I mean, I know 1 through 3 Stitch, and you can go to Hoffman's, which is one of those 2 websites, and have more of a selection. But, you know, to go into a store and find one, that's a lot of fun. So I was happy to get that. Next one I got there, continuing on with the cat theme. This one from Silver Creek Samplers. I beg your pardon. So, and as a kitty person, love those toe beans. Not so fond of the claws. But I just thought this was cute and funny. And I actually don't have anything else by Silver Creek Samplers, so it was nice to get that. Another one I got that I have seen a number of people on Flosstube stitching, and I've loved it, so I pulled the trigger on it to get it. This is Bygone Stitches Quaker Christmas 2. To be honest, I think if I did it, I probably would flip it and do all of the motifs in green and the lettering in red. For one reason, I like green better than red. And secondly, I think that would make the names pop more. But don't have any plans to start this anytime in the near future. Lots of time to figure that out. And the last one I got at that store was from Rosewood Manor. This is Owlsmore Cottage. And I've seen this around quite a bit at various stores that I've gone to. But this was in the half price bin, so I couldn't leave it. So very pretty chart. And then I also went to Shepherd's Bush. And I was very excited to have a chance to go there. I've heard great things about this store. And I walked in, and it's just chock-a-block full of models, to the point that, like, some of the models are so high up in the wall that even if they have little tags on them. You can't read the tags. At least I can't read the tags because, my distance vision is fine, but the tags were, not that the tags themselves are so small, but they were so high up that you couldn't read them. I'm sure if I'd asked what any of them were, I would have been told. But I walked around the store, and it's definitely a store where there's lots of nooks and crannies, things squirreled away. So it's not just sort of everything laid out. So you can spend a lot of time sort of looking through things, walking around, and then you walk around again and find another little nook. So I enjoyed doing that. And then I also had a little bit of extra time because they did pull a kit together for me. So some of the ones that I got, this is Plum Street Samplers. This is Foxfuse. This is one of her little stacks that she does. It's really cute. This one I probably wouldn't have gotten except they had a model on the wall, and it's just, I don't know, the model to me seemed just so stunning to sort of have this silhouette. And if I looked at the pattern briefly, and that is actually not stitched. And then just sort of varies with this sort of faint background. But the model on the wall was just stunning. And so, and I was surprised when I realized it was the Cricket collection, because this is, I always think of Cricket collection with, they have all their words and that kind of style. And this was different. This is an older one, I think, of theirs. And I also got from Madame Chantilly Spring, so one of her tiered trays. This one, which was an out of print Blackbird that came back into print. So this one, Birds of a Feather, is the name of the pattern, Blackbird Designs. And I think what really draws me are these, what I call lollipop flowers. I don't think that's actually what they are called, but that's what they remind me of, those old time lollipops. So a lot of fun. And a friend of mine that I know in person is stitching that, and it looks really good. And then I saw this, and I just couldn't walk away from it. So this is Teresa Wensler. What is it called? Castle Sampler. People with the money, the bottom, the musicians are kind of funny. But it was funny because they have a lot of stuff out, but then they also have some charts in like wooden, I would call them wooden magazine holders for lack of a better term. So you can sort of pull them out and look at them. And this was in there, and it was something called Castles. So I just looking in there to see what I had. And you can see they have a sticker on here, but there was no price written on there. So I wasn't sure how it was priced. And so I took it up to the front. I said, hey, could you just tell me what this is? And she looked and could see that there's no, she's looking really carefully to make sure it wasn't faded or something. And then she sort of looked in the back. See if you can, I don't think you're going to be able to see that. She goes, oh, it's $6.50. So I'm like, sold. So I guess so they just gave me the price that was printed on the back. So I don't know if that was a used chart. It doesn't look used. I mean, it looks aged. I mean, it's a little bit here, but when you open it up, it is pristine inside. So I don't know if it's just something that's been sitting there for a while, or if they buy used stock. I don't know exactly how it works, but I was like, sold for $6.50. I'll take a Teresa Wensler. And then the last thing I got from them, and we always talk about how the picture never does the stitch justice. And so often you will see a picture of something, you're like, yeah, that's nice, and move on. And then you will see the model and be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I have to have it. If I had seen this picture, I probably wouldn't have been like, yeah, that's nice. I've been like, yeah, whatever. The model was absolutely stunning. So this is called the Earth Gatherers, and absolutely stunning, the model. And so I bought the kit, and they had to pull the kit together for me, which comes, it's just DMC and that, but what, I'm going to have to make a little noise here. What it does come with, which is why I wanted the kit, it does have the little embellishment pack, and it's not just beads. It's hard. You're not going to be able to see this very clearly, but little charms and stuff that goes on there as well. So I really wanted to make sure I got those, because I knew if I had to source those myself, that would never happen. And it's a 32 count linen, so right in my wheelhouse. So those were all, I got some small threads, and and other little like needles and stuff, but I'm not going to show those all to you. So that is all of the stitching related content. So I hope that you enjoyed all of that. I am going to talk a little bit about what I read and watched. So the one book I'm going to talk about, this is called Strawberry Lane from Jodie Thomas. I won this book in a giveaway from Goodreads. And so part of the deal about winning the book is you read it and you talk about it. And they want an honest review. So that's what I'm going to give. This is the first book I've ever read by her. She's kind of a Southern romance writer. And I knew that going in. The basic premise of this book is, and it starts off at the very beginning, there's an old man who has fathered a number of children, but hasn't kept in touch with any of them, or the mothers. The kids never met their dad, whatever. And on his deathbed, his will says, I would like to basically split all my assets amongst my 4 children, ranging from like 14 to 30. And so he knows that these children exist, but he has never met them, as far as I'm aware. They don't really talk. The kids, the two that show up in this book, never have met him. It was a fun read. It was an airplane read. The chapters are very short, and I sometimes find when I read a book and all the chapters are really short and they're sort of, it's all third person, but you're still sort of getting different storylines. Pulling that thread all together made it a little bit discombobulating. As you start to get to know the characters more, you can kind of sit back into it and read it a little bit more. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't, in terms of romance, it wasn't the best book. And it's not a traditional romance where there's one lead, usually female character, and one lead male, and that they're all going to end up together. It really didn't follow that, but it is a romance. There are characters who, start relationships, let's put it that way, and real relationships, not one night stands. So anyhow, I enjoyed it, but it's a 3-star book for me. This is part of a series, but it's not one. I probably will not go out seeking the others, but if the others somehow ended up with me, I probably would read them. So that is Strawberry Lane by Jodie Thomas. What I've been watching, I recommend so much. So I knew there was a book out there, came out, 2020, 2021, around that time frame, called The Other Black Girl, and didn't really know much about it. And I knew the basic premise was there is a Black woman who works in publishing, and she is basically the only white employee. The only Black employee. I don't even think there are other employees of color. So she's the only employee of color in this publishing firm, and she's like an assistant to an editor. She does not have a senior position, but she wants to work her way up to be an editor. And she knows this, and there has only been one Black senior editor in the past. And then there is another Black woman, even younger than her, who starts. And they sort of relate to one another, but then very early on, she kind of undercuts the one who's been there a little bit longer and sort of sets up. So you start to think, well, maybe there's that sort of office dynamic. There's the racial side to it, but then there's also just the dynamic in an office where someone comes in and sort of sets you up and then undercuts you. And, so you think, okay, after the first episode, that's what's happening. But then as it goes along, I can't remember how many episodes there were. It's a limited series. It goes on and there's something more that's going on. And it gets to be like deliciously creepy is the way I would put it. And it was one of those things you're watching and you're like, I don't know where this is going. And it's not, I've seen some people refer to it as horror. I would not refer to that way at all. There is no blood or gore. There is someone gets hit by a car, but you don't really see much. It's like that to me is not horror. That's in any thriller. And that's almost where I would put this. But it's creepy. Something is going on, something isn't right, but you don't really know. And I believe the book is a standalone. The TV series, the limited series, they clearly have set it up for season 2. So I now have the book from the library. I'm going to read it because I really need to know, is it a standalone or is it, does the book give the answer, or did they take a leap off with the limited series? So, but I would highly recommend it. I believe it's on Hulu. I could be wrong about that, but really, really enjoyed it. And it's always amazing when you find something and you don't know up until the end, like where it's going. So highly recommend that. I don't remember the two lead actors' names, the two younger Black actors in there, but Eric McCormick was in it, and as well as Bellamy. I don't remember her last name. Eric McCormick from Will and Grace, and Bellamy was in Scandal, I think. But she one of those people who definitely plays a sort of sweetly malevolent. I mean, she's all like, the cover is all sweetness and light, and then can play like this really power hungry, malevolent character. Anyhow, I really enjoyed watching that. So that is all I have for you today. I hope to come back the week after the Queen City Stitch Retreat and let you know what I got up to, my shenanigans there. So until then, happy stitching. Bye.